Okay.
The juice.
06 Explorer 4.6 in this week, this guy's talking about. And it had a bank 1 misfire, code cylinder 1 and 3 misfire. So he cleared the bank 2 fuel trims, they were high, plus 12% at idle. Did banks first, we did the plugs first, then cleared the misfires, but bank 2 fuel trims were still out of balance. See, worried about that. So got 12% idle and over 20% at 2500. So usually if you've got a vacuum leak or something, whenever you're applying the throttle, you'll have more air going through there and it'll swallow up a small leak. So you're basically, let's say you got 12, 15, 25% idle, but when you give it the gas and it goes back to 0, you go back and look at a vacuum leak. See? Well, it is right, air increases. See, whenever you have 2500, back pressure is almost 0. The back pressure means you take the oxygen sensor out, you screw a fitting in there, like I made one, but you can also buy them, put a gauge on there, and this is the oxygen sensor in front of the cat. And you're basically gonna look at that gauge, it ought to have less than like 2 pounds of pressure with the engine running. There ought not to be a lot of pressure building up in front of the catalytic converter, that's the point. So this guy was doing this, so the pressure was good, no intake leaks, no smoke tests. He pumped smoke into the intake, see if you got, see it coming out somewhere. Injector waveforms all show good with pedal hump. The pedal hump is actually on, I'll have to show you that. It's basically when the injector opens up and that waveform's coming down, it'll have a little bump when the pedal pops up because of the deflection in that magnetic field. If it doesn't have that hump, you can tell that that injector pedal is not open. But anyway, VVT, variable valve time and pitch on near 0 at idle around 40 degrees at 2500. Do I have a jump, chain, or phaser issue? And here are the cam crank waveforms. You can see them down there, the ones that he put. Look pretty good. It's an Explorer like mine, basically, except this one's got a 4.6, mine's got a 4.0. Incidentally, on the way from, I put a radiator in that thing in 2014, and on the way from Geneva over here, it was trying to run hot, and so I had to take some of the water I carry with me everywhere I go and pour it in there. You know, so it looks like I ought to get another radiator because this is not a lifetime guarantee thing. But there's a date on the sticker on the top that says 2014. Anyway, there's your waveforms. Now, what you want to look at here is there's your missing tooth. You know how you got the missing tooth right there? Look here, see on this right here? See that missing tooth? That's that tall thing right there. And these right here are basically if they're on, well, like on the Ranger, for example, where you can adjust it. Typically, this is supposed to be crossing that center line 8 teeth after that missing tooth. On this one here, it may be slightly different. Well, this is people talking, right? Different mechanics talking about that. Did you already clear the keep alive memory and then drive it? Is it setting a lean code? Now, once again, if you feel like you've got one fixed and your fuel trims were out of balance, the best thing to do is clear the keep alive memory, either by taking the battery cable off or whatever, and then it's going to put everything back at 0. And if you drive it again and it starts, the fuel trims start walking, you still got problems. If they stay close to 0, all you needed to do is clear the memory out that it didn't rip. I did clear keep alive memory and drive, yes, lean code for bank 2. All right, this guy says, what's bank 1 fuel trims? Looks like a timing issue. Overlay the banks 1 and 2, cam position and the crank position. Idle is bank 1 minus 6 and bank 2 plus 12.5, 2500 RPM, minus 6, bank 2, 20 to 25. See, got something going on down here. All right, so this guy says, I'd be looking at the timing, maybe off the tooth, just not enough to set a diagnostic trouble code. He was suspecting that, but the scope capture looked like both cams are lined up almost perfectly, and we saw that a minute ago. Suppose it could be off at the crank, and possible cam phasers are stuck. Wouldn't that show on the scope? Opposing trims from bank to bank can be an indicator of timing issues, so is adding fuel on the other bank. Now this isn't really opposing. What he was talking about there, we had, I saw this Mustang one time that these guys had to pull the heads off of. When we put it back on, it ran really, really good as far as strong and everything, but the fuel trims were running 10 minus on one bank, 10 plus on the other bank. And whenever they went back in there, they found out it was a tooth, at the time it was a tooth advanced on one bank. I mean the valve timing, and it caused that kind of thing. Of course, you guys don't have 2 banks over there. Y'all got any V6 engines at all over there? You got some?
Diesel,
Okay.
diesel V6,
Oh, diesel.
yeah, we got also some V8,
Okay.
but no straight 4.
Okay. Always good to have somebody from Germany. I don't know what it's like over there, but he does. So. All right, conversation. Only bank 2 is getting extra fuel added. Oxygen sensor signals seem to be accurate and both switch just fine. Are the rear O2s confirming the fronts are working properly? These are the ones behind the catalyst. See what I'm saying? If the front ones are way off from the back ones, it may be that one of the front ones is telling a lie and you're doing a rationality check that way. Forgot to mention compression on bank 1 is about 100 on all cylinders, and on bank 2 it's 120. You know, 100 PSI cranking? Yep, cranking. So it's got low compression. It ought to have, if it's got overhead cam, you ought to have a heck of a lot more compression than that. So he's got low compression across the board, doesn't he? Now that's not running. Running compression is going to be lower. Cranking compression is going to be higher, right? So the only one, that is way low. 100 PSI is my bottom limit. I like to see 120 minimum, which is still low on an engine that's got overhead, cam. Another reason I'm suspecting either time and chain jump or phasers are stuck doesn't seem to have a lack of power. Seems like it runs pretty good too, is what I get. So this thing, I have individual upstream catalytic converters, check back PSI in each bank. Did do this, no back pressure. See, this guy's already covered his bases. You know what I mean? All right, so I would prefer to watch upstream oxygen sensor and short fuel trim while spraying carb clean or propane to check for intake leak. Now this guy here's already smoke tested the intake. But somebody's going back to this. Rubber gaskets often swell with a smoke test versus vacuum. See, he had a reason why he'd rather do it that way. I think it's something else we used to have. Sometimes the rubber gaskets would leak when the engine was cold when you first started, and they'd swell up and seal when it was hot. Seen that before too. I did try that, didn't see any changes. Was hoping it was a vacuum leak so I could make easy money. Ha ha ha. All right, so if you got a pressure transducer in a plug hole, check valve timing. That's that little, we've gone over this again and again, right? All right, so the trim should be higher at idle than higher revs for a vacuum leak. That's what I was saying earlier. There's worse revs. These are worse as the revs climb. If on bank 1 a relative compression will tell, so will a vacuum transducer in the intake with the throttle seal. So if you reckon peak compression pressure will be lower, valve trimming off, the timing would be massively off before you saw a peak pressure drop. And cylinder would confirm, but I've never done one. See, these guys right here do this every day. And they're all thinking their way through this thing, trying to figure out what's wrong. Instead of just saying, oh, that ain't really a good thing to do. This guy, reached out to some help me, the other guys are trying to help me. You reckon peak compression pressure would be lower with the valve timing off? The timing would be massively off before you saw it in peak pressure drop, and cylinder would confirm, never done one. If on one bank, yes, at least it'll be a good scope with good tools. Vacuum transducer will too. If it's off crank both banks, then it could be harder. More referring to the relative compression, thought it wouldn't show in starter circuit current as the peak pressure would be very similar. Starter circuit current, you take an inductive probe and you put it around the starter wire and you spin it over, and every time you have a cylinder squeeze in air, you're going to see it. And if actually you've got one that's got less compression than the rest of them, the hump won't be as high. Or if harder to move than the rest of them, it'll be a higher hump. That's what they're talking about there. With AC off, measure battery current as well as with firing order. If the whole bank, you should see some anomaly. That was an ongoing. Never got to the conclusion on that one. You know what I mean? But you can see how these people are thinking though. They're all trying to give this guy some good stuff. Let's jump on another one. We put a used engine in a vehicle that was supplied by warranty company due to a blown head gasket. Vehicle came in the next day after having the engine installed with a P0301. Picture 1 is the call that came out of cylinder number 1. Found that the PCM was not trying to control the coil after replacing the coil and clearing the check engine light. Replace the PCM. That's what the coil looked like. And posted it all up and everything. The vehicle ran initially in the shop after the PCM replacement. Came right back after getting on the highway with the same busted up coil. Put a new coil in there and destroyed that one too. Picture 2 is the second coil we installed on cylinder number 1. What could cause the coils to do this? Right? Now you know how the coil works, right? It's got power going to it. You saw over here. It's got power going to it and it gets a pulse that triggers it to fire, right? Typically. Now some of them have got internal circuits and all that, but one way or another, newer used PCM, newer used coil. This guy's asking pertinent questions here. New PCM, first coil was original to replacement, second coil came off old engine. Whoever original coil came apart, then PCM was, it said however, was replaced, then second coil came apart. These are notoriously bad, now listen to that, about coil drivers getting stuck on the ground and toasting coils. If it gets stuck, instead of delivering it, if it holds, These ignition coils like this one right here too, these E-core ignition coils, if they get stuck on ground, they'll destroy those coils. They won't look bad, they just won't fire anymore. These coils like this one right here, they can take a dead short to ground. These E-core coils like that one and this one, they can't. Anyway, never been sure what was the chicken and what was the egg, but there's a TSB saying replace the PCM with an updated part, change all the coils with new, possible coil drive wire shorted to ground too. Alright? Alright, check the wire to the coil, unplug it both ends, see if it'll light a headlight. If the wire is good, you understand what he's saying? You're basically going to unplug the wire from both ends, from the PCM and from the coil. Alright, and then you're going to put a ground in here, good solid ground in here, hook a headlight to hot, and then hook the ground of the headlight to here. The headlight's going to pull what, 5 amps? About as much as the fuel pump, right? So if it'll burn the headlights, you know, you got a good strong wire that can handle a load. If it won't burn the headlight, you know, it'll burn a test light sometime, but it won't burn a headlight. I got a video about that where we had the Ranger one time got to where it wouldn't start. You could take a test light, pump wasn't running. Take a test light and you go in there and it would light that test light. But when you took a headlight bulb and hooked it up to that same circuit, that headlight bulb wouldn't light. Headlight bulb pulls about as much as the fuel pump. That meant we had a bunch of voltage drop on the ground side, is what it turned out, and we had to run a ground overlay on that one. Check number 1, spark plug. An open and secondary creates excessive heat in the coil since there's nowhere for the high voltage to go. Now that is rule of thumb, but on some of the Fords, what they like for us to do on the cop coils, if you're going to stress test the cop coil, you put a little pickup on the top of that coil and look at your scope while you just put the coil up here and get with a spark with nowhere to go. That's counterintuitive because usually when a spark ain't got nowhere to go, it's going to try to go somewhere and try to destroy the coil. This exact scenario on a 3.58 replaced a spark plug coil and PCM fixed and delivered it. And so Ford put out a bulletin of the problem. Originally the bulletin would replace all 6 coils and replace the PCM, maybe an update. So you got to replace all the coils at the same time you replace the PCM, and so on and so forth. All right, this is where you got his replacement PCM. All coils and plugs ran to their old PCM and new and come back and bite you. Don't forget to double check the spark plug numbers. If you put the wrong spark plugs in there, you can have trouble too. See, that's the same right there. Now, next conversation. The first step to searching for a dead miss. This is that starter. You know, whenever you hook your inductive pickup up and you're looking at the on the scope at the amp pump spinning the starter, every time it squeezes air on a cylinder you get a little bit of upkick on your amp. And now this one right here, look at that first hump. See how tall it is? We'll talk about that again in a second. Assuming the large jump at the beginning is the issue. See, this guy was asking about that large hump. Just now getting his hands on scope and thanks advanced for info. Now listen to this. This is pretty cool. Large humps, the initial surge in current as the starter starts to spin. You know when you first start to spin one, how it takes more? He says, think about pushing a car. You know, when you're pushing one of these cars in, when you first start to push it, don't want to move, and then when you get some going, you know. Take off with a high amp, clamp off the battery terminal. You can do this with voltage. It's been a while since I did it. Somebody can elaborate. Low compression issue cannot be missed using this method. It really makes a dip. So the one that has low compression is going to have a lot, you know, be almost flat. All right, thought you were checking all your coils with a clamp. So he wasn't checking coils, he was checking, you know, the starter draw with that thing. So much to learn. Initial hit of the starter to get the engine turning takes more amps, pushing the car, so on and so forth. Now, he said, I must be getting old. Search my name and relative compression, you'll get a few posts, you know. And yellow's voltage display of relative compression and green at coil firing. So relative compression and coil firing can be compared on the scope, and you can get an idea of when that coil is firing in relation to when the compression is happening. And you can find something like that. Must be nice to get paid by the hour. Flat raters just do a coil swap. See, now on the shop and get paid by the job, we do normally have more hours. A lot of that tends to make less comebacks, pros and cons. When he was flat rate, he took the time to diagnose things properly. Came out way ahead just swapping parts. You can take screenshots of good and bad waveforms, show customers, it builds confidence even if they don't have a clue what they're looking at. Right? So confidence in the shop means more repair. That's the difference between diagnosis and changing parts. Diagnosing at first generally takes less time and results in less comeback. Now this guy right here, he's got him a neat little cart he's built. That's pretty cool, isn't it? All right, so when you're ready to act up, Mr. Jeep 4 liter, I'm ready. Crank and cam codes and has new parts installed from another shop. using an old, that's not an old Sun scope, it's something he bought. He said PC card he bought at an auction for 10 bucks, 24-inch monitor inside, laptop and keyboard drawer. He's using a Pico scope, that same scope that we got out here. All right. And you see all right there. Now you know what this is, right? What's that gonna be? That's gonna be the crank sensor. This is gonna be the cam sensor. All right, this is gonna be, that looks like primary ignition. And they're ramping, you know, on that, they're ramping the, all right, so about the boom in the boom box. It's similar to what I did out here, except his is prettier than mine, right? Shielded BNC extension leads inside the boom of the box, BNC connectors on the box. So, how's your setup on that coil pack for that 4 liter? You see Kim cranking injector and coils driving to train the eye and appreciate you posting it. Got to get my setups down pat, that's where I lose time. All right. So, crank, cam, coil, primary current. See, he's ramping it right there. Secondary ignition with cop wand. You know, like that, you know, that blue wand I got that I lay on top of the coil that we got here? I got it from AES Wave. All right. It had coil primary codes too. That's why I'm scoping coil shorts to ground when misted with water. All right, now this right here is your primary. This right here, if you're thinking about ignition points, the points close. This is when the points open. This is when the spark plug fires. This here is how long it is that this distance or time right here, because this is voltage over time. And this time right here is how long the spark is burning. See, when it initially jumps, it's kind of like that high hump at the beginning of the relative compression. When it initially jumps, and how long it burns is right here. And as it ramps up on the end, that's because it used up the fuel. When it used up the fuel, the resistance increases, and it jumps up, and then it snaps, and you got a little rough leftover energy here that could have been used if you had more gas. That's the thing. All right, so look at the main sensor ground on the passenger side of the block. Sometimes you see that right there. They're notorious to be dirty and loose, causing random shutdown with codes ranging from O2 heater circuits to cam crank to automatic shutdown, a lot of other things. On these Chryslers and Jeeps and stuff, they got a relay that powers up the injectors, the alternator field, and another thing called an ASD relay, automatic shutdown relay. It's vaguely similar to an e-power relay, but it's slightly different the way it's wired in there. The harness that wraps around the back of the head comes loose and rubs through too. See, these are people that have seen known problems on these vehicles, so this is where you look. Safety neutral switch gives problems. Those safety neutral switch on one of those Jeeps is $175. It's real expensive. All right, so you gotta love the scope detail you can capture. It's also built in library of waveforms and so on and so forth, you know. So basically, that's a neat little scope pattern. Now you see what he's going on here. He's got something he's looking at. Pretty neat. See what he's talking about there. Positive voltage, the piezo crystals opening the injector. The negative voltage is the ECU shutting it down. All right, you see that? Opening the piezo injector. A piezo injector, basically what a piezo injector does, if you know about quartz, you know, is that one of these little cigarette lighters that you snap it and it makes a little spark? You know, you take one of those cigarette lighters apart and snap it and make a spark jump out and hit your hand and all that kind of stuff. Well, whenever you apply pressure to quartz, it makes voltage. And when you apply voltage to quartz, it changes, you know, size. And it doesn't have to do very much, you know, as far as that. But whenever, this is all about piezo injectors here. And so basically they're having to go back and forth with the voltage and apparently open and close on this particular vehicle. Seen a garage disconnect the piezo injector while running to trace a misfire and blew a hole in the piston. Now these right here, the piezo injectors that I'm familiar with are the ones that are on some of your Power Stroke diesels. You know, because that thing gets 1/1000th of an inch shorter whenever you put that voltage on there and all that. So that's what piezo injectors do. Now the Duramax one is not piezo, it does it a different way. But one way or another, find I'm still learning. You be left with more questions than you have answers. With technology going at such a rate, there's more to learn each day. All right, so that was it. That was a short little session, but what I was trying to get you to look at here is how the people that do this all the time think. And there are some guys that are just getting started on scopes even in these forums. You see what I'm saying? And they're trying to get their head wrapped around it. And whenever we go to you know, KC Vision and places, there's all kinds of classes up there on, you know, this is how you hook up the scope, this is how you use it. Most of them use these little pin program, little pricks that go into the wire, and then you got some little stuff you can paint on there if you want to keep the wire from being exposed where you pricked it with your little, you know, the thing you pull the trigger and it bites into the wire that I got out here, you know, we got all those, and they use those. And you get in there, when you know which wire to get into, you're looking at those scope patterns, you're looking at voltage over time. picture of what's going on, which is a good thing to have. And so you guys are gonna get some heavy scope stuff going on. You need to, right? More than we already have.